In this quick tutorial video, I'll show you how to use the Freeform pen tool to create your own paths of different objects in your image, which you can then use to make selections and do other manipulations in your photo. The cool thing about using a path is that it's always available for you once you create it. So the first thing I need to do is duplicate this layer so that I don't accidentally harm the original, and I'll turn off the original so it doesn't interfere at all. I'm going to zoom in, and let's say I want to create a path around the top face of this B letter. So I'll come over here, and the Freeform pen tool is underneath the pen tool, and I'll go up to the options area, change it so that it's drawing a path, and then make sure that you set up your settings to fit whatever photo you're using. You might need to change these settings depending on how high definition or low quality the photo is. So just play with these until you get a good set going and that your path is coming out the way you want it, and you'll be good to go. So for here, I'm going to leave it at the curve fit of 2. I'm going to turn on magnetic. What that is going to do is it's going to look for high contrast colors, and it's going to be able to draw a path between those colors, and it's going to look really good with minimal effort on my part. So I'll just leave these base settings that I have going right here. Make sure it says magnetic because, again, that's going to make life easier. And I'm going to start in a high contrast area, and I'm just going to click once with my mouse, and I'm not holding a mouse button. All I'm going to do is I'm going to drag along the edge of that particular shape. I'm not clicking, I'm not holding the mouse down. It's adding anchor points, those little squares that you see that are following behind me. Those are anchor points that are kind of like geometry. They go from this XY coordinate to this X and Y coordinate, and that's where we get these mathematical vectored lines. So it's following along and adding anchor points because we have high contrast between the green and the whitish yellow that is the desk. Now, where we might have problems is when we come around this curve and all of a sudden it's green between green. So as you can see, the path starts wiggling and it may not make a good path. So if it starts to do that and you start to panic, and let's say you go out here and now you can't get out of the tool, well, this happens to a lot of people when they're first working with a magnetic lasso or the Freeform pen tool. So what you need to do is go back to each anchor point that was mistakenly created, move your mouse over to that point. You don't have to click or anything, just move your mouse, and then hit delete or backspace on your keyboard so that you can delete all of those new anchors that were created until you get back to the point where it all went wrong. So instead of having that happen, when I go around a curve and I realize that it's going to have a problem because of contrast, what I can do is I can manually create my own anchor points by clicking. So if I click once, it's going to add my own anchor point, keep going, and anytime you turn a corner, you generally want to create an anchor point if it doesn't do it for you, because that is where it usually has a hard time with contrasting colors. So as we move down around here, if you don't like it, you can go back and create your own anchor points. And this has a better contrast, so it's easier. And then I can come around this curve. And once I get to the very starting point, now you'll notice the pen tool has a little circle next to it, and that will close this path. So once I click on that beginning endpoint or that beginning anchor, it creates a fully closed path. So what can we do with this path? Well, if we go to the Paths panel, you'll see that now you have a work path here, and it's in white, and the rest of the stuff that isn't a part of the work path is in gray. What we can do now is we can load this as a selection, and it's available to you for you to use time and time again, and it's saved permanently with this document when you save it. So what I can do is I can come down here and I can click Load Path as a selection, or I can just Command or Control click on this icon and it's going to create a selection from it. So if we go back to the Layers panel, I can grab a hue and saturation and I can change the top face of this letter. And as you can see, when you create the hue and saturation, because it was loaded as a selection, it created a layer mask. So the hue and saturation is only affecting this B and not the rest of the information outside of it. So the cool thing about a path is that you can come back later and you can Command or Control click again and load it again as a selection in case you wanted to change things or make another copy of it, Or let's say I go back over to layers and I click on this background image and grab my move tool. I can actually move that front facing bee around. So, and then I can maybe alt drag to create a couple of different copies. So anyway, you can do a lot of different things with a path, but the coolest part is that it's always available for you to use again and again and again.